4, 3, 2, 1. Hello. Welcome to J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategies in 15 minutes or less. I am your J.E.D.I Master, Holly Holiday, and we are back again for another Thursday. We will be here for a short time, but not a long time. And we are still talking about implementing equity plans in the workplace. When we started this, we started talking about, and it's important for you to recognize that implementing equity and inclusion plans is a process, and it is a process that runs in cycles. And there are 4 key cycles to implementing equity and inclusion plans. These cycles, you can enter the cycles at any point, but it is important if you're going to have an effective plan that you make your way through the entire cycle at least once. And if you are truly committed to having equity and inclusion be a sustainable part of your workplace culture, then you will go through these cycles many times over and over again as you constantly rise to the new and expanding challenges that exist when we have humans coming together. So what are those 4 key cycles? Well, if you haven't been paying attention or haven't been clued in, or maybe this is your first time finding us here at J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live, the 4 cycles are planning, implementation, monitoring and evaluation, and sustainability and scalability. Now, just as a reference point, if this is your first time and you like what you hear and you want to hear more, again, you can start this process at any point. So we're happy to have you start with us here today. But if you want to go back and listen to some of the other tips that we've given, and again, they're all in 15-minute or less increments, you can check out our YouTube page, Holiday Advisors on YouTube, and see some of the stuff that we've shared. Now today we are beginning part 1 of implementing equity plans through monitoring and evaluation, which in our previous work and our previous conversations, we've already covered the planning phase as well as the initial implementation phase. So if that's more what you're interested in learning about today, check out our YouTube channel because it is all there waiting for you. But as for today, we are focused on monitoring and evaluation. Just as a quick refresh, the planning stage includes things like conducting an equity assessment, setting clear objectives, involving stakeholders, securing funding and resources, and a legal review. When you get into the implementation stage, we will discuss things such as leadership in government, staff training, pilot testing, rollout, and communication. And those are some of the topic areas that we covered under the first 2 cycles that we discussed. Now we are moving into the 3rd cycle of discussion, monitoring and evaluation, and we will start out today with data collection. Let's start with the premise and the understanding that continuously gathering data to evaluate a program's effectiveness is essential. This is where you begin to identify what are those objective standard methods of evaluation. What are those things that we are going to count, to put it quite simply? And we want to make sure, and these metrics can include many things, but you want to make sure that it's something that is present over time so that you get that longitudinal, you're able to do a longitudinal analysis, but also something that is manageable within the system. You don't want to spend so much time trying to count stuff that you don't actually make an impact in your organization. So it needs to be something that's manageable. What are some things that metrics might include? Well, they could include changes in your demographic representation. They could include qualitative interviews. They could include assessments of outcomes related to the program's objectives. So there's a bunch of different ways for us to think about what is data and what should be collected. Let's start it off with um, what kinds of how we get to that point. You want to make sure that you first are clearly defining your objectives. So this is not new information. We talked about this before, and we're bringing it forward from our previous cycles. Defining your objectives is critical. Now, it gets repeated here because some of you may be starting by doing this, may start your entry into the cycles of implementing your plans with monitoring and evaluation. So we mention it here so that you can have a connection between, if you start here, to make sure that it is connected to your overall plan. So you must look at having clear objectives. You want to be able to answer questions like, what are we looking for? What is it that we're trying to address? This means that you have a clear problem identified. It could be that you lack representation in your staff. How are you defining that? Are you defining that based on the customers that you seek to reach? Are you defining that based on the population under which your business or organization sits? Are you defining that based on maybe even just a national standard based on the demographic, excuse me, Lord, tongue twister today. I can't get it out. Demographic makeup that we have here in the United States or whatever country your organization may be located. There is no really wrong answer here, and there are many different options. The key is to choose an option that works best for the organization and the pilot and the problem that you are trying to solve. You also want to have a clear understanding, or at least a hypothesis, of what you want to achieve. So how do you know what success looks like? This is all part of defining your objectives. Once you have your objectives defined, then the next thing you want to do is identify the metrics under which you will be measuring. So for instance, as I mentioned, common metrics may include demographic data. Demographic data can include things like age, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. They could include geography, could include religion. Keep in mind that many of these are protected categories. And so if you are tracking demographic data related to a protected category, you are required to let people volunteer that information as an option and not as a requirement. It is also important. Other things could include employee satisfaction surveys. I have to admit, this is one of my favorites. You may actually be and choose to engage in an at least annual employee satisfaction survey to give people a sense of where you are to where you started. These employee satisfaction surveys can be used as a baseline to evaluate how you're doing in your workplace over time. More on baseline analysis in a future upcoming video. Other things to think about are statistics that you may be collecting organically anyway, like retention rates, promotion rates, or pay equity analysis. Now, let me say a minute about a pay equity analysis. Frequently, this is going to look at what is the rate of pay and the trends around payment in your industry. Not your industry, and sometimes in your geography as a combination. This isn't just looking at an overall pay equity space. You want to try to be as specific as possible to the industry that you're in, because every industry has some different norms and data around how they are paying their people. And I'll give you an example. If you are in, for instance, a space like Washington, D.C., where we have an over-index of government and federal government employees, but you happen to be, let's say, in a nonprofit space, your industry norms may not be evaluated in the same way that a federal government pay scale is evaluated. Yes, you want to be aware of that because that may be a space that is in competition with you for talent, but you want to be evaluating your equity pay as it relates to others in your industry, because again, those are going to yield you the most similar kinds of results. All right. The other thing, when you think about collecting data that is important for you to be aware of, is privacy and confidentiality. Now, all data collected is not necessarily kept private. The key here is you want to share with people what they can expect will happen with any information that's given to you. If you are planning to share it, that is allowable, but you need to let people know that you're going to share it. And if you're planning to share it and include anything that may have a personal identifier, then you need to actually get their permission to share it. In most cases, we encourage people to maintain a level of privacy and confidentiality, to explain what those levels and protections are before gathering the information, and to be clear that you are in compliance with any data protection regulations, including things like EEOC, GDPR, or HIPAA. Finally, we'll round out with this, and that is, be sure to use a mix of qualitative and quantitative data. That is so essential, so that you are looking both at the statistics or numbers, that is the quantitative, as well as the qualitative. This is how employees feel like their testimony or through interviews. This helps you to build a comprehensive picture that helps to contextualize quantitative findings that you may identify. More coming up next week. This has been your J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Strategies in 15 minutes or less. It has been a pleasure spending a little bit of time with you this Thursday. Next week, we will talk about feedback loops and how we're creating channels for feedback with stakeholders. We've talked about stakeholders before, and we'll talk about them again as it relates to monitoring and evaluation. That's all for now. See you next week. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media channels as we continue to try to deliver strategies and insights for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Did you enjoy this segment of J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live? I'll be back next Thursday. Come on back and bring a friend.